Sarah Mitchell looked nothing like a world-renowned chef as she quietly cleared tables at Romano's upscale Italian restaurant, her simple black uniform and worn sneakers blending into the background. The other staff barely noticed her, and the arrogant head chef Marcus Bellacorte treated her like she was invisible. But when a kitchen crisis struck during the restaurant's most important night, they desperately forced the humble waitress to step behind the stove. Marcus sneered as he handed her the apron, certain she would embarrass herself in front of the influential food critics and wealthy patrons. He had no idea that Sarah was actually Sarah Mitchell Rousseau, the youngest chef ever to earn 3 Michelin stars, who had stepped away from her empire after a personal tragedy. What happened next left everyone speechless. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. Sarah Mitchell moved through the elegant dining room of Romano's like a shadow, her simple black uniform and worn white sneakers, a stark contrast to the gleaming marble floors and crystal chandeliers that dominated the upscale Italian restaurant. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore no makeup or jewelry that might draw attention to herself. While the other servers glided between tables in their crisp uniforms and polished shoes, Sarah seemed almost invisible, quietly refilling water glasses and clearing plates with an efficiency that went unnoticed by management but deeply appreciated by the guests she served. She had a gentle way of anticipating needs before customers even realized they had them, appearing at the perfect moment with extra napkins or a fresh bread basket, always with a soft smile that never seemed forced despite the long hours on her feet. The regular patrons had begun requesting her section specifically, drawn to her warm presence and attentive service, though she deflected their compliments with quiet humility. Behind the kitchen's swinging doors, head chef Marcus Bellacorte barely acknowledged her existence except to bark orders about table numbers and timing, his expensive designer chef's coat and perfectly waxed mustache reflecting his inflated sense of importance. When Sarah occasionally offered suggestions about customer preferences or dietary restrictions she had noticed, Marcus would dismiss her with a wave of his hand and a condescending smirk, muttering about waitresses who needed to stay in their lane. Restaurant owner Vincent Romano was no better, treating Sarah like part of the furniture, never bothering to learn her name despite her 6 months of flawless service. He would stride through the dining room in his tailored suits, greeting important customers while completely ignoring the woman who had quietly built a loyal following among his clientele. Sarah absorbed their dismissive treatment with the same grace she brought to everything else, her calm demeanor never wavering even when Marcus publicly berated her for minor infractions that weren't her fault. She seemed to understand something that escaped the others completely, that true worth wasn't measured by titles or recognition, but by the quiet dignity with which one treated every person and every task. Little did they know that their humble waitress carried secrets that would soon turn their world upside down in ways they never could have imagined. Marcus Bellacorte strutted through the kitchen of Romano's like a peacock, displaying his plumage, his custom-made chef's coat bearing his monogrammed initials in gold thread, the fabric so pristine white it seemed to glow under the harsh kitchen lights. His signature burgundy tie was perfectly knotted despite the heat of the stoves, and his Italian leather clogs clicked authoritatively against the polished concrete floors as he made his rounds, inspecting every station with the air of a general reviewing his troops. At 28, Marcus had clawed his way to head chef through a combination of culinary school connections and ruthless ambition, though his actual skills barely matched his enormous ego. He ruled the kitchen through fear and humiliation, his sharp tongue cutting down anyone who dared question his methods or showed even the slightest sign of independence. When junior cook Tommy accidentally oversalted a sauce, Marcus exploded with theatrical fury, his voice echoing off the stainless steel surfaces as he berated the young man in front of the entire staff, calling him worthless and threatening to blacklist him from every decent restaurant in the city. The other cooks kept their heads down and worked in tense silence, knowing that any small mistake could trigger another one of Marcus's legendary tirades that left grown men questioning their career choices. His treatment of the waitstaff was even worse, dismissing them as mere servants whose opinions meant nothing in his culinary kingdom, especially that quiet waitress Sarah who had the audacity to occasionally offer feedback about customer preferences as if her observations mattered. But tonight was different. Tonight was the night that would make or break Marcus's carefully constructed reputation. Because Romano's was hosting its most important dinner service in years. Food critic David Chen from the prestigious Metropolitan Dining Review would be attending alongside wealthy investor Patricia Whitmore, who was considering a major financial partnership with the restaurant, and several other influential figures from the city's culinary elite. Vincent Romano had made it crystal clear that this dinner could secure Romano's future as one of the city's premier dining destinations, and the pressure was entirely on Marcus to deliver a flawless performance that would showcase his supposed genius. Marcus had spent weeks planning the menu, choosing only the most expensive ingredients and complex preparations that would demonstrate his sophisticated palate and technical prowess, never once considering that his arrogance and cruel management style had already planted the seeds of his own destruction. Emma Rodriguez had only been working at Romano's for 3 months, but she possessed the kind of genuine warmth that made even the most demanding customers feel welcome. Her bright smile and eager-to-please attitude, marking her as everything Marcus despised in what he considered the inferior serving staff. Unlike the other servers who kept their distance from Sarah, Emma had immediately gravitated toward the quiet waitress, sensing a kindness and wisdom that others seemed to miss entirely, often seeking her advice about difficult tables or sharing small talk during their brief breaks in the cramped employee break room. Emma's youthful optimism provided a stark contrast to the toxic atmosphere that Marcus had cultivated. And she alone seemed to notice how Sarah's gentle suggestions about customer preferences were always spot on, though she couldn't understand why such valuable insights were consistently dismissed by management. Tonight's VIP dinner carried weight that extended far beyond a single evening service, with David Chen's attendance representing the pinnacle of culinary validation that could elevate Romano's from a successful neighborhood restaurant to a nationally recognized destination. Chen's reviews in the Metropolitan Dining Review were legendary for their brutal honesty and technical precision, his words carrying the power to fill restaurants for months or close them within weeks, and his presence at Romano's represented Vincent Romano's most ambitious gamble in 15 years of business ownership. Patricia Whitmore commanded even more respect in different circles. Her investment firm, having transformed struggling restaurants across 3 states into profitable empires, her business acumen matched only by her discerning palate and her reputation for walking away from deals the moment she sensed weakness or dishonesty in potential partners. Vincent Romano had spent months courting both Chen and Whitmore, knowing that their combined endorsement could secure Romano's future for decades, while their disapproval could doom the restaurant to mediocrity, and the pressure of this realization had been building for weeks as every detail was planned and replanned to ensure perfection. The reservation book showed 17 other influential guests joining Chen and Whitmore, including food bloggers, local restaurant owners, and several members of the city's social elite who followed Chen's recommendations like gospel, creating an evening where a single misstep could ripple through the entire culinary community. Marcus had assured Vincent that his carefully planned menu would dazzle the critics and secure the investment, his confidence bordering on arrogance as he dismissed any concerns about his ability to handle such a crucial service, never imagining that his greatest challenge would come not from the complexity of his dishes, but from his own cruelty finally catching up with him. The first sign of disaster came at 4:30 in the afternoon, when Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his sous chef Antonio, whose message about sudden stomach flu and explosive vomiting was graphic enough to make Marcus's own stomach churn with dread rather than sympathy. Antonio had been Marcus's right hand for 2 years, the only cook skilled enough to handle the complex sauce work and delicate timing that tonight's elaborate menu demanded, and his absence left a gaping hole in the kitchen's carefully orchestrated hierarchy that Marcus had never prepared for because his ego wouldn't allow him to imagine needing backup plans. The second catastrophe struck just an hour later, when line cooks Jennifer and Miguel both called within minutes of each other, their voices weak and strained as they described identical symptoms of food poisoning that had left them bedridden and unable to stand without dizzying nausea, apparently victims of contaminated seafood they had shared during their lunch break at a questionable food truck downtown. Marcus stood in the middle of his pristine kitchen watching his carefully planned evening crumble before it even began, his designer chef's coat suddenly feeling like a costume that no longer fit as sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the air conditioning that kept the kitchen at a steady 68 degrees. The remaining kitchen staff consisted of only Tommy, the junior cook he had humiliated earlier, and Maria, an experienced but elderly prep cook, whose arthritis made her too slow for the high-pressure service that lay ahead. While outside in the dining room, Emma was already seating the first wave of VIP guests whose expectations had been raised to impossible heights. Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway during this moment of panic. Her quiet presence almost ghost-like as she approached Marcus with the same calm demeanor she brought to everything else, her voice soft but clear as she offered to help in any way she could. Explaining that she had some cooking experience and understood the importance of tonight's service to everyone's livelihood. Marcus turned on her with the fury of a cornered animal, his face flushing red with embarrassment and rage as he unleashed a torrent of contempt. Telling her that waitresses belonged in the dining room serving customers, not pretending they could handle real cooking, his voice dripping with condescension as he dismissed her offer with a wave of his manicured hand and ordered her back to her tables before she embarrassed herself and the restaurant with her presumptuous delusions of competence. By 7:15, the kitchen had descended into complete chaos as orders flooded in from the VIP dining room faster than Marcus could possibly handle, his movements becoming increasingly frantic and uncoordinated as he attempted to manage 4 different stations simultaneously while sweat dripped from his brow onto the pristine white plates. Tommy was burning garlic bread and overcooking pasta in his desperate attempt to keep up, his hands shaking from the pressure and Marcus's constant screaming, while Maria's arthritic fingers moved too slowly to properly julienne the vegetables that were piling up in a backlog that grew more insurmountable by the minute. The sophisticated dishes that Marcus had planned to showcase his culinary genius were coming out inconsistent and delayed, with sauces breaking under the heat of his panic and proteins overcooked from his inability to properly time multiple orders, creating a cascade of failures that he tried to hide from the dining room staff, who kept returning with increasingly impatient requests from the VIP guests. Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway again during this meltdown. Her calm presence, a stark contrast to the pandemonium around her, as she quietly observed the disaster unfolding, her trained eye immediately identifying the fundamental problems with workflow and timing that could be easily corrected with proper organization and technique. She approached Marcus again with the same gentle offer of assistance, but this time she demonstrated her knowledge by pointing out that his hollandaise was about to break from overheating and suggesting he lower the flame while whisking in cold butter to save it, her voice steady and confident as she explained the exact temperature control needed for the delicate emulsion. Marcus's response was even more vicious than before, his humiliation at being corrected by a waitress transforming into pure rage as he screamed that she needed to know her place and stay out of his kitchen, his words cutting through the noise as he told her that serving coffee and clearing tables didn't qualify her to understand real cooking, that waitresses were hired to smile and take orders, not pretend they belonged in a professional kitchen where actual skill and training mattered. He ordered her out with such venomous contempt that even Tommy winced at the cruelty, while Maria shook her head in disapproval at the way Marcus was treating someone who was only trying to help during their obvious crisis. Sarah absorbed his abuse with the same dignified silence she brought to all his previous insults, her expression never changing as she turned and walked back to the dining room, leaving Marcus to face his mounting disaster alone, with only his wounded pride and rapidly diminishing options for salvation. The final catastrophe struck at 8 o'clock, when Marcus, in his frenzied attempt to plate the signature osso buco for David Chen's table, accidentally left the expensive veal shanks under the broiler too long, the smell of charred meat filling the kitchen as smoke billowed from the oven, and the $100 dish transformed into an inedible disaster that represented everything going wrong with the evening. Orders were now backing up for over an hour, with 17 tables of VIP guests growing increasingly restless as their carefully timed courses arrived cold, late, or not at all, while Emma and the other servers faced the impossible task of making excuses for delays that had no reasonable explanation. Vincent Romano stormed into the kitchen like a man possessed, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled from stress as he surveyed the chaos that was destroying his restaurant's reputation in real time, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury as he grabbed Marcus by the shoulders and demanded to know how his head chef had managed to turn the most important night in Romano's history into an unmitigated disaster. The dining room was buzzing with whispered complaints and disappointed faces, with David Chen himself checking his watch repeatedly, while Patricia Whitmore had already made several pointed comments about the unprofessional service, their dissatisfaction rippling through the other VIP guests, who were questioning whether Romano's deserved their time or investment. Vincent's threats came in a torrent of rage and desperation, his words cutting through the kitchen noise as he told Marcus that his job was hanging by a thread, that 15 years of building Romano's reputation was being destroyed in a single evening, and that if the situation didn't improve immediately, Marcus would be clearing out his station before midnight and looking for work at a chain restaurant where his incompetence might go unnoticed. Faced with the complete collapse of everything he had worked for, and the very real prospect of professional ruin, Marcus swallowed his pride and turned to the dining room where Sarah was calmly serving bread to a table of increasingly impatient food bloggers, his desperation finally overcoming his arrogance as he stormed over and grabbed her arm. His voice was a mixture of command and barely concealed panic as he ordered her into the kitchen immediately, telling her that since she thought she knew so much about cooking, she could prove it by helping to salvage what was left of the evening. His cruel smile returning as he anticipated watching her fail miserably in front of Vincent and the remaining staff, imagining that her inevitable humiliation would somehow restore his own damaged authority and provide a scapegoat for the disaster that was entirely his own making. Sarah walked into the kitchen with the same quiet composure she brought to serving tables, her movements unhurried despite the chaos swirling around her as she reached for a clean apron from the hook near the dishwashing station, tying it around her waist with practiced efficiency, while her eyes swept across the disaster zone that Marcus had created. Marcus positioned himself directly behind her like a vulture waiting for carrion, his arms crossed and his signature smirk firmly in place as he prepared to watch her inevitable failure, already composing the cutting remarks he would make when she proved herself as incompetent as he expected. All waitresses to be in a real kitchen environment. Vincent Romano stood near the pass watching with desperate hope and growing anxiety, knowing that this Hail Mary attempt was likely his last chance to salvage the evening before his VIP guests walked out and took Romano's future with them, while Tommy and Maria exchanged worried glances as they wondered how this quiet waitress could possibly help when even Marcus himself had failed so spectacularly. Sarah began with what appeared to be simple organization, her hands moving with surprising confidence as she quickly assessed the backed-up orders and began prioritizing them by cooking time and complexity, her voice soft but clear as she suggested, "They focus on getting the appetizers out first to buy time for the more elaborate entrees." Marcus scoffed loudly at her obvious suggestions, telling Vincent that this was exactly what he expected from someone whose culinary training came from watching cooking shows, but his condescending commentary faltered slightly when Sarah picked up a knife and began breaking down vegetables with a precision and speed that seemed almost professional. Her knife work was flawless, her julienne cuts perfectly uniform and executed with the kind of muscle memory that only came from years of practice, while her movements around the kitchen showed an intuitive understanding of workflow and station setup that puzzled both Tommy and Maria, who had never seen a server demonstrate such natural kitchen instincts. When Sarah quietly corrected the temperature on a sauce that was about to break, explaining the exact heat adjustment needed in technical terms that surprised everyone present, Marcus's smirk began to waver as he realized that her knowledge went far beyond what any ordinary waitress should possess. She moved between tasks with an economy of motion that spoke to deep experience, seasoning dishes with confidence and adjusting cooking times with the kind of instinctive timing that Marcus himself had never fully mastered, leaving the remaining kitchen staff wondering exactly who this mysterious woman really was. Within minutes of beginning work, Sarah had transformed from a helpful waitress into the unofficial leader of the kitchen, her quiet voice cutting through the chaos as she gently directed Tommy to focus on the pasta stations while she handled the more complex protein preparations. Her suggestions delivered with such calm authority that both Tommy and Maria instinctively began following her guidance without question. Her knife skills were nothing short of mesmerizing, as she effortlessly broke down a whole chicken in under 30 seconds, her blade moving with surgical precision, while she simultaneously monitored 3 different pans on the stovetop, adjusting heat levels and seasoning with the kind of multitasking expertise that took most cooks years to develop. Marcus watched with growing unease as Sarah began reorganizing the entire kitchen workflow, her movements revealing an intimate knowledge of professional cooking that went far beyond anything a waitress should possess, especially when she began explaining advanced techniques like proper emulsification and temperature control in language that sounded almost professorial in its precision. She guided Maria through a complex sauce reduction with patient encouragement, showing her how to achieve the perfect consistency, while simultaneously teaching Tommy the proper way to achieve the ideal sear on expensive steaks, her teaching methods so effective that both cooks were producing better results than they ever had under Marcus's harsh criticism. The most unsettling moment came when Sarah casually corrected the seasoning on Marcus's signature dish, tasting it with a small spoon and immediately identifying that it needed more acid balance and a touch of fresh herbs, her palate so refined that she could diagnose flavor problems that Marcus himself had missed entirely. Her plating technique was equally impressive, her hands moving with artistic precision as she arranged components with a kind of visual sophistication that belonged in fine dining establishments, far more prestigious than Romano's, each dish leaving the past looking like something from a culinary magazine rather than the desperate attempts at recovery that Marcus had been producing. Marcus's smugness had completely evaporated, replaced by a growing sense of dread as he realized that this humble waitress possessed skills that surpassed his own in every measurable way, her calm competence making his earlier panic look even more pathetic by comparison, while she quietly rescued the evening he had so thoroughly destroyed. The kitchen staff had begun looking to Sarah for direction rather than Marcus, their natural deference shifting to someone who actually knew what she was doing, leaving Marcus feeling like an outsider in his own kitchen as his carefully constructed authority crumbled before his eyes. The transformation was immediate and undeniable, as the first plate Sarah had prepared left the kitchen pass, their presentation so elegant and sophisticated that Emma gasped audibly when she picked them up, the artistic plating and perfect color balance making them look like they belonged in a Michelin-starred establishment rather than the chaotic disaster zone the kitchen had been just an hour earlier. David Chen was among the first to receive one of Sarah's creations, a perfectly seared duck breast with cherry gastrique that had been languishing half-finished when she took over, and his expression changed the moment he took his first bite, his eyebrows raising in genuine surprise as the complex layers of flavor unfolded on his palate with the kind of technical mastery he rarely encountered even in the city's most celebrated restaurants. The duck was cooked to an exact medium rare, the skin crackling with perfect crispness, while the meat remained tender and juicy, paired with a gastrique that balanced sweet and acidic notes with the precision of a master chef. And Chen immediately called Emma over to ask who was responsible for the dramatic improvement in both presentation and execution. Patricia Whitmore received her appetizer moments later, a delicate seafood risotto that had been salvaged from Marcus's earlier failed attempt, and her reaction was equally pronounced as she savored the creamy arborio rice that had been perfectly cooked to maintain just the right amount of bite while absorbing the subtle flavors of saffron and white wine that enhanced, rather than overwhelmed, the fresh scallops and prawns. Word began spreading throughout the dining room like wildfire, as guests who had been growing increasingly impatient with the delayed service suddenly found themselves experiencing food that exceeded their highest expectations, their conversations shifting from complaints about slow service to animated discussions about the exceptional quality of every dish that emerged from the kitchen. The food bloggers at Table 12 were already taking photos of their entrees, their social media posts beginning to generate buzz about Romano's unexpected culinary excellence, while the other restaurant owners in attendance exchanged knowing glances and whispered questions about whether Romano's had secretly hired a new head chef without announcing it to the culinary community. Vincent Romano moved through the dining room with renewed confidence, his earlier panic replaced by cautious optimism, as he watched his VIP guests' faces light up with genuine satisfaction and delight, their praise flowing freely as they complimented not just the flavors but the sophisticated techniques and artistic presentation that elevated every single dish to a level far beyond what Romano's had ever achieved before. Marcus straightened his burgundy tie and smoothed his monogrammed chef's coat as he prepared to venture into the dining room, his practiced smile returning as he convinced himself that he could somehow claim responsibility for the miraculous turnaround that everyone was praising, his mind already crafting explanations about how his expert guidance had finally brought out the best in his kitchen team during this crucial evening. He approached Vincent Romano with renewed swagger, gesturing grandly toward the busy kitchen as he took credit for the dramatic improvement, claiming that his strategic decision to bring in additional help had been part of his master plan all along, his voice carrying the same arrogant confidence that had characterized his leadership style before everything had fallen apart so spectacularly. But Tommy and Maria exchanged incredulous looks behind his back, their expressions making it clear that they knew exactly who deserved the credit for saving the evening, while Vincent's skeptical frown suggested that he too remembered Marcus's earlier panic and desperation, far too clearly to be fooled by this sudden revision of history. Back in the kitchen, Sarah continued working with the kind of effortless mastery that made complex techniques look simple, her hands moving with balletic grace as she simultaneously managed 6 different preparations without breaking concentration or losing track of the precise timing each dish required for optimal results. She was creating food that transcended anything Romano's had ever served, her braised short ribs falling off the bone with perfect tenderness while maintaining their shape, her handmade pasta achieving the ideal al dente texture that most cooks struggled with for years, and her sauces displaying the kind of depth and complexity that came from understanding flavor profiles at the molecular level. The contrast between Sarah's calm confidence and Marcus's growing anxiety was becoming more apparent by the minute, her steady breathing and relaxed shoulders a stark counterpoint to his fidgeting hands and darting eyes as he realized that his attempts to take credit were becoming increasingly hollow in the face of her obvious superiority. Every dish that left her station was a masterpiece of both technique and artistry, her plating so sophisticated that it elevated Romano's reputation with each plate, while Marcus found himself reduced to hovering nervously in the background, his usual commanding presence diminished as he watched someone else demonstrate the kind of culinary excellence he had always claimed to possess but never actually achieved. David Chen set down his fork after finishing the most extraordinary meal he had experienced in months, the final bite of Sarah's perfectly executed chocolate soufflé still lingering on his palate as he called Emma over, with the kind of urgency that made every server in the restaurant immediately pay attention to his table. His request was simple but terrifying for Marcus, who overheard from his position near the kitchen pass where he had been desperately trying to maintain some semblance of authority while watching Sarah continue to produce culinary miracles with effortless precision that made his own skills look amateurish by comparison. Chen's words cut through the dining room noise like a blade, his professional curiosity evident, as he explained that he absolutely had to meet the chef responsible for what he was calling one of the most technically perfect and creatively inspired meals he had encountered in his 15-year career as a food critic, his praise so effusive that other diners turned to listen. Marcus felt his carefully constructed world beginning to collapse as panic seized his chest, his breathing becoming shallow as he realized that he could never convincingly take credit for the sophisticated techniques and flawless execution that had characterized every single dish Sarah had prepared, his mind racing through impossible scenarios where he might somehow claim responsibility without being immediately exposed as a fraud. Vincent Romano appeared at Chen's table within moments, his face glowing with pride and anticipation as he promised to bring the chef out immediately, his confidence in Marcus's abilities completely restored by the evening's dramatic turnaround, unaware that his head chef was currently having what could only be described as a mental breakdown behind the kitchen doors. Sarah remained completely focused on her work, her concentration unbroken as she plated the final orders of the evening, with the same meticulous attention to detail she had maintained throughout the crisis, her calm demeanor suggesting that she was either unaware of the praise being heaped upon her work or simply didn't consider it worthy of interrupting her dedication to perfection. Marcus's professional facade was cracking visibly now, his hands shaking as he loosened his burgundy tie and ran his fingers through his perfectly styled hair, his usual arrogance replaced by the dawning realization that he was about to be exposed as incompetent in front of the most influential food critic in the city, while the woman he had dismissed and humiliated continued to demonstrate the kind of culinary mastery he could only dream of achieving. David Chen approached the kitchen with the purposeful stride of a man who had suddenly connected dots that others had missed entirely, his trained eye having recognized something in the plating style and flavor combinations that went far beyond mere coincidence. The distinctive way Sarah arranged microgreens and the sophisticated sauce work, triggering memories of meals he had experienced in the world's most prestigious dining establishments. Vincent Romano followed closely behind, his excitement palpable as he prepared to introduce his head chef to the most important food critic in the city, completely unaware that he was about to witness a revelation that would change everything about how he understood his own restaurant and the people working within it. Marcus hung back near the dishwashing station, his face pale and sweaty as he watched the two men approach the pass, where Sarah continued working with her characteristic focus, her hands steady as she put the finishing touches on a plate that displayed the kind of artistic sophistication that belonged in culinary museums rather than neighborhood Italian restaurants. The moment David Chen's eyes locked onto Sarah's face, his expression changed from curiosity to absolute shock, his voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and recognition, as he spoke the words that would shatter every assumption everyone had made about the quiet waitress they had all dismissed and overlooked. "Sarah Mitchell Rousseau," Chen said, his voice cutting through the kitchen noise like a thunderclap, the full name hitting the assembled staff like a physical blow. As the implications began to sink in, though most of them had no idea why this particular combination of words had caused the famous food critic to stare at their humble colleague with something approaching reverence, the kitchen fell into complete silence, even the sizzling of pans seeming to quiet as Sarah slowly turned from her station, her calm expression unchanged as she met Chen's gaze with the same quiet dignity she had maintained throughout the evening, while Marcus felt the floor seem to shift beneath his feet as he realized that something monumentally significant was happening, but couldn't yet comprehend the full scope of his own ignorance. Tommy's knife stopped mid-chop. Maria's stirring spoon froze in her hand, and Vincent Romano's confident smile wavered as he looked back and forth between the food critic and his waitress, sensing that the name Chen had spoken carried weight that he should understand but didn't, the silence stretching like a taut wire ready to snap as everyone waited for someone to explain why their entire world suddenly felt like it was balancing on the edge of a precipice. David Chen's voice filled the silent kitchen with the weight of culinary history as he explained to the stunned audience that Sarah Mitchell Rousseau had been the youngest chef ever to earn 3 Michelin stars, her restaurant Lumiere in Manhattan having set the standard for innovative American cuisine before she mysteriously closed it 2 years ago and vanished from the culinary world at the height of her fame and success. The accolades tumbled from Chen's lips like a litany of achievements that seemed impossible for the humble waitress standing before them. James Beard Award winner at 26, featured on the cover of Food and Wine magazine, consulted by restaurants across 3 continents, and personally trained by legendary French chef Auguste Beaumont, who had called her the most naturally gifted cook he had encountered in 40 years of teaching. Vincent Romano's legs nearly gave out beneath him as the full magnitude of what had been happening under his nose became clear. While Tommy and Maria stared at Sarah with expressions of awe and disbelief, suddenly understanding why her knife skills had seemed so impossibly perfect and her palate so extraordinarily refined. Chen's voice softened with genuine sympathy as he explained that Sarah had disappeared from public life after the tragic death of her 8-year-old daughter Emma in a car accident, the grief causing her to close Lumiere at its peak and retreat from the celebrity chef lifestyle that had consumed her life, seeking solace in anonymity and simple service to others rather than the spotlight that had once defined her existence. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as the full horror of his behavior crashed over him like a tsunami. The realization that he had spent months humiliating and dismissing a chef whose talent exceeded his own by margins so vast they were almost incomprehensible, his cruel words and condescending treatment now revealed as the actions of a small, petty man attacking a giant he was too ignorant to recognize. The burgundy tie that had been his symbol of authority now felt like a noose around his neck as he remembered every sneer, Every dismissive comment, every moment he had told this legendary chef to stay in her lane and remember her place. His arrogance transformed into shame so profound that he couldn't meet anyone's eyes as the kitchen remained frozen in stunned silence around the woman who had quietly saved them all. David Chen's voice carried throughout the dining room as words spread like wildfire about the revelation in the kitchen. His explanation reaching the VIP guests who had been praising the extraordinary meal, their amazement growing exponentially as they learned that the quiet waitress who had been serving them bread and water was actually one of the most celebrated chefs in modern culinary history. Patricia Whitmore abandoned her dessert and rushed toward the kitchen, her business instincts immediately recognizing the incredible opportunity that had been hiding in plain sight. Her mind already calculating the potential value of having a 3 Michelin-starred chef associated with Romano's in any capacity, even as she struggled to process how such extraordinary talent had gone unrecognized for so long. The other VIP guests followed her lead, creating an impromptu procession of food bloggers, restaurant owners, and culinary enthusiasts who wanted to witness this unprecedented moment, their phones already buzzing with messages to colleagues about the shocking discovery that was about to transform Romano's reputation overnight. Chen continued his impromptu biography of Sarah's achievements, explaining how her signature techniques were taught in culinary schools, how her cookbook had become required reading for serious chefs, and how reservations at Lumiere had been impossible to secure for industry insiders, painting a picture of culinary genius that made everyone realize they had been in the presence of greatness without knowing it. Marcus, desperate to salvage some shred of dignity from the wreckage of his reputation, attempted to interject with claims about how he had recognized Sarah's potential and deliberately given her opportunities to showcase her skills, his voice growing increasingly shrill as he tried to spin his cruel treatment as some kind of mentoring strategy designed to bring out her best work. But his pathetic attempts at revision only made him look more foolish and dishonest, especially when Tommy couldn't contain himself any longer and blurted out the truth about how Marcus had berated and humiliated Sarah throughout the evening, his words crushing Marcus's last hope of maintaining any credibility. As the assembled crowd turned to stare at him with expressions of disgust and disbelief, Patricia Whitmore's face hardened as she processed the full implications of Marcus's behavior, her business acumen immediately recognizing that anyone cruel enough to abuse such extraordinary talent was exactly the kind of toxic employee who could destroy a restaurant's culture and reputation, while Vincent Romano stood frozen in horror as he realized that his head chef had been systematically mistreating the most valuable person who had ever worked in his establishment. Vincent Romano's face flushed crimson with embarrassment and rage as the full scope of Marcus's behavior sank in, his humiliation at having allowed such treatment of a culinary legend in his own restaurant, overwhelming any concern for maintaining professional decorum, as he turned on his head chef with fury that had been building throughout the degradation for 3-2 disastrous evening. His voice carried across the kitchen and into the dining room where the VIP guests watched with rapt attention, his words cutting through the air like daggers as he demanded to know how Marcus could have been so blind, so arrogant, and so unprofessionally cruel to someone whose talent surpassed anything Romano's had ever seen, his anger amplified by the realization that Sarah's presence could have elevated his restaurant to unimaginable heights if Marcus hadn't been too stupid and mean-spirited to recognize what was right in front of him. Marcus's attempts at self-defense were pathetic and increasingly desperate, his voice cracking as he tried to claim that he had been testing Sarah's resolve, that his harsh treatment was somehow a teaching method designed to bring out excellence, his explanations becoming more convoluted and obviously false with each word, as he realized that no one was buying his revisionist history of the evening's events. The assembled crowd of food critics, investors, and restaurant staff watched with a mixture of disgust and fascination as Marcus's true character was laid bare, his earlier arrogance stripped away to reveal the small, insecure man beneath who had used his position of authority to bully someone he perceived as beneath him, never imagining that his victim possessed achievements that dwarfed his own pathetic career. Patricia Whitmore's expression grew colder by the minute as she observed Marcus's desperate flailing, her business instincts recognizing the toxic personality type that could poison an entire organization. While David Chen took notes on his phone, already composing the review that would immortalize this moment, as one of the most spectacular examples of culinary karma he had ever witnessed. Marcus's final attempts to shift blame onto the kitchen crisis, claiming that stress had made him temporarily harsh, only served to highlight his complete lack of accountability and leadership skills, while Sarah remained silent throughout his meltdown, her dignity and grace providing a stark contrast to his increasingly unhinged behavior, as everyone present realized they were watching the complete destruction of a man who had destroyed himself through his own cruelty and ignorance. Sarah's voice broke the heavy silence that had settled over the kitchen. Her words soft but clear, as she finally spoke about the tragedy that had changed everything, explaining that her daughter Emma had been killed in a car accident 2 years ago while Sarah was working late at Lumiere, preparing for yet another high-profile event that had seemed so important at the time but meant nothing compared to the bedtime story she would never read again. The assembled crowd listened with respectful silence as she described how the relentless demands of maintaining 3 Michelin stars had consumed her life, how she had missed countless school plays and soccer games in pursuit of culinary perfection, and how the guilt of not being there when Emma needed her most had made it impossible to continue living in the spotlight that had once brought her such pride and satisfaction. Her words carried the weight of profound grief, tempered by acceptance. Her explanation of why she had chosen to work as a waitress, revealing a woman who had deliberately sought healing through humble service to others, finding peace in the simple act of making people's evenings a little brighter, rather than chasing accolades and recognition that felt hollow without someone to share them with. She spoke of how serving tables had reconnected her with the joy of hospitality that had first drawn her to cooking, how the quiet satisfaction of anticipating a customer's needs had helped her process her loss in ways that the high-pressure celebrity chef lifestyle never could, her voice steady despite the tears that glistened in her eyes as she shared her most painful truth with strangers who had become witnesses to her private journey. Marcus's voice cut through her touching explanation with another desperate attempt to redirect attention to himself, his words jarring and inappropriate, as he tried to claim that he had somehow sensed her need for healing and had been helping her process her grief through constructive criticism, his tone-deaf interruption causing several people to gasp in disbelief at his continued inability to recognize the magnitude of his own insensitivity. Patricia Whitmore's expression shifted from amazement to outright disgust as she watched Marcus attempt to exploit even this most sacred revelation for his own benefit, while David Chen shook his head in wonder at the contrast between Sarah's profound grace under unimaginable circumstances and Marcus's pathetic scrambling to salvage his reputation from the wreckage of his own making. The difference between genuine character and hollow pretension never more starkly illustrated than in this moment of raw human truth. Vincent Romano stepped forward through the crowd of VIP guests with the decisive energy of a man who had just realized he was holding a winning lottery ticket, his voice carrying absolute authority as he addressed Sarah directly, offering her the position of head chef at Romano's effective immediately, with complete creative control over the kitchen and a salary package that reflected her true worth rather than the insulting wages he had been paying her as a waitress. His words came in a rush of excitement and desperation, explaining that having a 3 Michelin-starred chef associated with Romano's would transform the restaurant overnight, attracting the kind of clientele and recognition that most establishments spent decades trying to achieve, while Marcus stood frozen in horror as he watched his entire career crumble before his eyes. In front of the most influential people in the city's culinary scene, Patricia Whitmore nodded approvingly at Vincent's offer, her business instincts recognizing the smart move when she saw it, while David Chen smiled with the satisfaction of witnessing justice being served in the most poetic way possible, his mental notes already forming the review that would make this evening legendary in food industry circles. Vincent's treatment of Marcus was swift and brutal but entirely deserved, his voice carrying the authority of an owner who had finally seen his employee's true character, as he demoted Marcus to line cook effective immediately and demanded that he apologize publicly to Sarah for his months of cruel and unprofessional treatment, the forced apology coming out in stammered, humiliated phrases that satisfied no one but were necessary for Marcus to keep any job at all in the establishment. Sarah's response was everything that Marcus's behavior had not been, her acceptance gracious and humble, as she thanked Vincent for the opportunity, while immediately establishing her conditions for taking the position, insisting that Tommy and Maria be promoted to sous chef positions with appropriate raises, that Emma be given the assistant manager role she had earned through her dedication and kindness, and that the entire restaurant culture shift to one built on respect and collaboration rather than intimidation and cruelty. Her words carried the authority of someone who understood that great food could only come from great people working together in an environment where everyone's contributions were valued. Her insistence on maintaining the current staff, demonstrating the same grace and loyalty that had characterized her quiet service as a waitress, while Marcus was forced to watch the woman he had tormented create the kind of positive leadership he had never possessed or even understood was possible. The transformation of Romano's reputation happened in real time as the VIP guests finished their meals and began sharing their experiences, their social media posts and phone calls to colleagues spreading the news of the evening's extraordinary events faster than Vincent Romano had ever dared dream possible, with food bloggers already posting photos of Sarah's stunning dishes alongside captions describing the most remarkable dining experience of their careers. Patricia Whitmore pulled Vincent aside before dessert was even served, her investment instincts operating at full speed as she tripled her original financial commitment on the spot, explaining that having Sarah Mitchell-Rousseau as head chef made Romano's the most exciting restaurant opportunity she had encountered in years, her confidence in the establishment's future success now absolute rather than tentative. David Chen was already composing his review on his phone, his fingers flying across the screen as he captured not just the exceptional quality of the food, but the incredible story of redemption and justice that had unfolded before his eyes, his words painting Romano's as both a culinary destination and a symbol of how true talent would always rise above petty cruelty and ignorance. The other food critics in attendance were equally effusive in their praise, their conversations buzzing with plans to return within the week and bring their most discerning colleagues, while the restaurant owners present were already wondering if they could somehow lure Sarah away from Romano's or at least convince her to consult on their own establishments. Emma was practically glowing, as Sarah personally informed her of the assistant manager promotion, the young woman's loyalty and kindness finally being rewarded with the recognition she had always deserved, while Tommy and Maria could barely contain their excitement at being elevated to sous chef positions that would allow them to learn directly from one of the world's most talented cooks. The kitchen staff, who had witnessed Sarah's quiet competence throughout the evening, now understood they were about to embark on an incredible journey of professional growth, their workplace transformed from a toxic environment ruled by fear into a collaborative space where excellence would be achieved through mutual respect and shared passion for the craft. Even the servers who had previously ignored Sarah were now approaching her with newfound respect and eager anticipation for the changes that would elevate everyone's working conditions, while Marcus stood in the corner folding napkins with the other line cooks, his former kingdom now ruled by someone who actually deserved the crown he had worn so unworthily for far too long. 6 months later, Romano's had been transformed beyond recognition, not just in its culinary offerings but in the very soul of the establishment, as the prestigious Michelin Guide had awarded it its first star in the restaurant's 15-year history, citing not only the exceptional quality of Sarah's innovative menu, but the remarkable hospitality and teamwork that had become the restaurant's defining characteristics under her gentle but decisive leadership. The dining room was booked solid 3 weeks in advance, with food enthusiasts traveling from across the country to experience what food critics were calling a masterclass in both technical excellence and emotional storytelling through cuisine, each dish reflecting Sarah's philosophy that great food should nourish both body and spirit while bringing people together in celebration of life's precious moments. Marcus Bellacorte had undergone the most dramatic transformation of all, his former arrogance replaced by genuine humility as he worked diligently at his line cook station, his expensive designer chef's coats replaced by simple kitchen whites as he learned to take direction from the woman he had once dismissed so cruelly, though Sarah's patient mentoring had slowly helped him develop not just better cooking skills, but a deeper understanding of what it meant to be part of a team rather than a tyrant ruling through fear. The kitchen had become a place of learning and mutual support, where mistakes were treated as opportunities for growth rather than occasions for public humiliation, and where every member of the staff felt valued and heard. their individual talents recognized and nurtured by Sarah's inclusive leadership style that brought out the best in everyone around her. Emma had flourished in her role as assistant manager, her natural warmth and organizational skills helping to create the kind of dining experience that made guests feel like welcomed friends rather than mere customers. While Tommy and Maria had grown into confident sous chefs whose skills had improved dramatically under Sarah's patient guidance and encouragement, the restaurant had become famous not just for its food but for its culture of kindness, with culinary students requesting internships and experienced chefs seeking employment specifically because they had heard about the positive working environment that Sarah had cultivated, proving that excellence and compassion were not opposing forces but complementary qualities that strengthened each other when properly balanced. Marcus's journey from tyrant to student had been difficult but ultimately redemptive, his newfound respect for his colleagues and his craft making him a better cook and a better person than he had ever been during his years of misguided authority. Sarah stood in the bustling kitchen of Romano's watching her team work together with the kind of seamless collaboration that only came from mutual respect and shared purpose, her heart fuller than it had been since Emma's death, as she realized that her greatest achievement wasn't the Michelin star hanging proudly in the dining room or the countless accolades from food critics, but the healing she had found through leading with compassion rather than the ego-driven ambition that had once consumed her life and cost her everything that truly mattered. The restaurant had become exactly what she had envisioned, a place where talent was recognized and nurtured, regardless of someone's background, appearance, or circumstances, where the quiet dishwasher's suggestions about efficiency were valued as highly as the sommelier's wine pairings, and where every person who walked through the doors as either employee or guest was treated with the dignity and respect that Sarah believed every human being deserved simply by virtue of being alive. Marcus's transformation from cruel tyrant to humble student had become a symbol of the restaurant's new culture, proof that even the most hardened hearts could change when shown genuine kindness and given opportunities for redemption, his journey serving as a daily reminder that people's worst moments didn't have to define them if they were willing to grow and learn from their mistakes. The success of Romano's under Sarah's leadership had rippled outward through the entire culinary community, inspiring other restaurants to examine their own cultures and question whether they were truly bringing out the best in their people or simply perpetuating cycles of abuse and intimidation that ultimately served no one and created inferior results for everyone involved. Sarah's story had become legendary not just for its dramatic reversal of fortune, but for its deeper message about the power of seeing past surface appearances to recognize the potential that existed in every person, regardless of their current circumstances or the assumptions others might make about their worth based on their job title, clothing, or social status. The lesson resonated far beyond the restaurant industry, touching everyone who heard it with the simple but profound truth that kindness was not weakness but strength, that humility was not submission but wisdom, and that treating others with respect and compassion created a world where everyone could thrive and contribute their unique gifts to the greater good, proving that the most successful leaders were not those who ruled through fear, but those who lifted others up and helped them discover their own hidden greatness.